Joining me now with in-depth analysis of these stories and more is the Papal Posse, editor-in-chief of the Catholic Thing, Robert Royal from Washington, and canon lawyer and priest of the Archdiocese of New York, Father Gerald Murray from Manhattan. Gentlemen, I want to get your thoughts on the consistory Ed and I were just talking about and some of the choices made here by Pope Francis. Bishop Robert McElroy of San Diego, not traditionally a cardinalatial see, I might add, and Archbishop Arthur Roche of the UK, the current prefect of the Congregation for Divine Worship. Father Jerry, your thoughts on these two selections. What did their admission to the College of Cardinals tell you?
Well, with Archbishop Roche, that's expected because he heads the Congregation for Divine Worship. Cardinal-elect McElroy's a surprise, but not a complete surprise, because he is a very prominent ally of Cardinal Suppick and Cardinal Tobin, who are cardinals who are very much part of Pope Francis's cabinet, we could say. Those are the American cardinals who are enthusiastic in support of Pope Francis's vision for the Church. Now, the regrettable thing for me is that Archbishop Gomez, who is the Archbishop of Los Angeles, the largest archdiocese in the United States, himself an immigrant from Mexico, and by all accounts, a very good leader in the Church, he was again not picked as cardinal, which is unheard of historically. So the Pope has a policy of favoring people who either are personally aligned with him or are from obscure places. Not that San Diego's obscure, but we have now a cardinal who is the prefect of Upper Mongolia, which is really remarkable because there are more Catholics in a small parish on Long Island than there are in the entire country, which will now have a cardinal.
Right. Well, Bob, this runs to the very heart of what I wanted to raise anyway, which is a cardinal and a cardinalatial see, the territory that he has dominance over, that was always usually a high population and high concentration of Catholics. So the cardinal represented that larger group. Now you have people from suffragette dioceses in infinitesimal places out in the world, God bless them, but they don't represent anybody. So here's the question. Pope Francis's selections in terms of the next conclave, what is he trying to communicate here? What kind of man is he trying to push to the fore? And is this a healthy College of Cardinals?
Well, I think there are two things that he's doing. I don't know how much he's pushing this, but it's clear that with the appointment of McElroy, we tend to use this term from politics, an ideological line. I would really like to stay away from political terminology when we talk about the Church. I think what it is it's a kind of a pastoral and theological line that he's been pushing. And every single one of the American cardinals, by the way, like McElroy, has had some connection with McCarrick, which some people write me and say they're a bit disturbed about. Now, that is one element in what he's been pushing, that this sort of vision that he has about what liturgy should be, what the future should be in relationship to the secular states that the Church must now confront. But there's a wholly different other line that I think has been neglected in the analysis, and that's this selection of people from the peripheries. As Father said, from what I hear, there isn't even a diocese in a place like Mongolia. And then we have other people who've been appointed from Paraguay and whatnot. Meanwhile, not only Los Angeles, but Paris, Venice, Poland, these places that traditionally had large populations have been neglected. Now, what I think that is going to do, and I could be wrong about this, is I don't think that the people from these peripheries share the same kind of ideological, again to use that phrase, but maybe theological or pastoral line. I don't think they share that with the First World. As we've seen in some of the previous synods, very often it's been the Africans and the Asians who have tried to resist some of the innovation from Europe and from the United States. So it seems to me that there are two different camps, if we want to put it that way. There is the kind of spiritual and liturgical and theological line that Francis has been pushing explicitly. But there's also this periphery that I think is going to be more traditional. And in the next conclave, who knows what they're going to do?
Great point. Father Jerry, the college is currently made up of 208 cardinals, 117 of those are electors. So those are the men who will elect the next pope. But after August, 132 cardinal electors will potentially be voting in the next conclave. Does this make the outcome of that next conclave any more predictable, given the influence Pope Francis has had on the demographics here?
I would say nothing's predictable, Raymond, because the cardinals really don't know each other as a group. Individual cardinals who have familiarity in Italy or in Europe or America will know each other. But, you know, the cardinals have not met in 7 years as a group, and all the cardinals named during that 7-year period have not had the chance to talk to each other. Now, you know, as Bob pointed out, cardinals from the periphery had no expectation that they were going to become cardinals. You know, in the way the church works, usually bishops who arrive at a diocese like Paris or Los Angeles or New York, they've already had lots of experience in managing smaller dioceses. They have a national profile. Now we have basically unknown figures. On the other hand, I have to say, I'd like to add, I lament that the major archbishop of the Ukrainian Catholic Church of Lviv, he was not named a cardinal. Even though he has provided heroic leadership to his people during this time of the Russian invasion. So the idea that you pick people who really have no profile, just come from an obscure place, that doesn't really fit in with the nature of how the College of Cardinals is conceived, at least in the modern era.
As I mentioned to Ed Penton earlier, Pope Francis has made some significant appointments this week to that Congregation of Divine Worship. We have talked for weeks, maybe months now, about the suppression of the old rite and this new vision being advanced. The Cardinal Archbishop of Chicago, Blaise Cupich, will become a member, joining the prefect, the head of that congregation, soon to be Cardinal Arthur Roach of the UK. Bob, Cupich here in the U.S., he's known as not only a Francis loyalist, but an enthusiastic supporter of the restrictions on that traditional Latin Mass. Of course, Archbishop Roach replaced Cardinal Sarah at the Congregation for Divine Worship. Is there a pattern here? And is this the price, you will, of passage, that you have to support this stamping out of the old rite, the old ways to ascend in the church?
Yes, I mean, clearly in the liturgical field, you're right to say that he seems to be putting a great deal of emphasis on that. I don't know exactly why, because as we all know, the traditional Latin Mass is attracting people. It's dynamic. It's not for everybody. There are lots of people who are very happy with the newer liturgies, but that was a growing part of the church, a very dynamic, living part of the church. And in the past, I mean, our whole tradition is built on a kind of a uniformity or unity in multiplicity. That if you were someone interested in helping the poor, you joined Mother Teresa or the Franciscans. If you were inclined toward the intellectual life, you joined the Jesuits or the Dominicans. There's a diversity within a kind of a unity that has always marked the church. I was at the Consistory in 2001, in February 2001, where Cardinal Egan from New York and Avery Dulles, the American theologian, prominent American theologian, were rather traditional and were named cardinals. At that same consistory, we also had named as cardinals Theodore McCarrick and Cardinal Casper, who were on the kind of the opposite side, a more progressive side. So in the past, you would try to balance out the different elements in the church and not just promote one element. It seems to me that this, if you want to put it this way, overloading of the liturgy commission is one of the ways that we're seeing a real push to kind of make sure that the legacy of the Holy Father is going to be secure even after he leaves his position.
You know, Father Jerry, someone in Rome told me this past week, they see this as Pope Francis's last stand, his kind of last attempt to commandeer all the weapons at his disposal and set the course for the future. I want to talk a bit in that respect about how these appointments could affect that ongoing synod on synodality process. In a recent op-ed in American Magazine, soon-to-be Cardinal Robert McElroy writes, our synodal process should not automatically reject certain topics or positions for dialogue and deliberation merely because they're questions of long-held discipline in the life of the Church or a reformable Catholic doctrine. Father Jerry, what's the bishop getting at here? And are subjects like the ordination of women merely disciplines or doctrines to be reformed?
Well, if Cardinal-elect McElroy is thinking about what the Germans are proposing, then they want married priests. That would be viewed as simply a disciplinary matter, but it's much more than that. It's a theologically based discipline. And then reformable doctrines, this is a category that I'm not too familiar with because doctrine is taught as truth coming from Christ, taught through the apostles. That includes women cannot be ordained to the priest. Homosexual acts are intrinsically immoral. There is no such thing as same-sex marriage. Same-sex unions cannot be blessed because they are sinful by nature since they involve homosexual activity, which is sinful by nature. So I'm not sure what he's talking about, but I know what the German bishops are talking about. And we know the president of the German Bishops' Conference recently said he's disappointed the church is not moving fast enough. He's confident it will. But he even said, unbelievably, if the church didn't move in the direction that he wanted, he might consider leaving it, as recently a prominent former vicar general of a diocese left and joined the old Catholic movement. So what we're looking at here is a rolling revolution, and endorsing it in any way is basically putting the church into a calamitous position. This is not what the church is supposed to be doing. We don't question doctrines, and we support disciplines that are, of ancient and very holy origin. The reason priests don't get married primarily is because Jesus didn't get married. I mean, let's not forget that. So big problems coming down the pike.
Yeah, but Bob, do you think we're getting into a position here that the Church of England has been grappling with for decades, where you have an overturning of established belief and then a rupture of communion within, where you have cardinals and bishops just walking away?
Yeah, the dynamic here is quite interesting because there hasn't been, we're talking about synodality at synods, where things are supposed to be discussed. Well, in the meantime, there hasn't been a lot of walking together among the cardinals. As Father said earlier, it's been 7 years since there's been a consistory. Normally, the way that the church develops a kind of a program for the upcoming years is as the cardinals are talking with one another and they begin to know one another, they talk with the Holy Father, they talk with the officials in Rome, and there's a kind of a global conversation that's going on. In my view, that has been largely displaced to this much vaguer synodal process, which, as we can anticipate, is going to be largely run by bureaucrats who've been especially chosen to arrive at a specific outcome, one that the Holy Father has been indicating, I think, in the previous synods as well. So there's really been a shift in where the future conversation is taking place. It's not taking place among the cardinals, among the highest officials and the most prominent people in the church, but now it's been displaced to this place where we don't know what the process is going to be, but the outcome seems to be very worrying.
Yeah, I agree. I think that conversation, and the only people who really care about synodality, and the only time you hear it even brought up, is among church bureaucrats. The people don't care, and I think the hierarchs are dealing with their own problems. This is the last thing on their minds. So you're right. The bureaucrats are basically running this operation, and the outcome, I do think, is going to probably be preordained. The controversy over Archbishop Salvatore Cordileone's denial of communion to House Speaker Nancy Pelosi continues to burn here in the United States, with other Catholic bishops pledging to support Cordileone's decision in their own dioceses. Bishop Vasha of Santa Rosa, we had him on the program last week, Bishop Strickland of Tyler, Bishop Burbage of Arlington, Sample of Portland, they've all expressed support. At the same time, you have Cardinal Wilton Gregory of D.C. and others, including McElroy, who say this is the wrong course. What is the cost of this kind of disunity among the bishops, Father Jerry? And isn't there a canon law prerogative at play here, a mandate?
It's called Canon 915, Raymond, and Archbishop Cordileone enforced it. Canon 915 says that those who persistently remain in manifest grave sin in a public way are not to be admitted to the Holy Eucharist. And Archbishop Cordileone did precisely that. He gave the appropriate warnings. He attempted to speak with her. She wouldn't listen to him. Now, the fact that the Archbishop of Washington, where Nancy Pelosi also lives and attends Mass, will not enforce Canon 915, I think is a very serious mistake. You know, all the time we're told there's got to be Episcopal solidarity. Well, when a bishop enforces canon law and he's not supported by others, that's a real lack of fraternal charity, in my opinion. And what is the effect on the general population? Somehow they get the idea someone is okay to receive communion in one diocese but not in another. And they say, I thought this was a universal church where the rules apply to everybody all across the world. They should. In fact, this is a serious problem that the American hierarchy did not deal with a year ago when they had their big meeting on the Eucharist. And part of the reason, sad to say, was that Cardinal Ladaria from the Congregation of Doctrine of the Faith told them essentially, go slow and don't do anything before you get back and consult with us, which was a clear message, don't do anything. Well, Archbishop Cordileone did the right thing. We got to remember what we're talking about here. Two things that are of grave seriousness. One, the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist, and secondly, the killing of unborn children. You can't go and support killing children, saying, now I want to receive Holy Communion. Complete contradiction. Archbishop Cordileone has done the right thing.
Yeah, no, it does seed in this idea, though, and Father Jerry, you touched on it, that perhaps we're moving away from the universal Catholic Church because you're allowing every locality to basically make up their own rules. And when you have established canon law on the books, established doctrine being implemented, and that's ignored utterly, meanwhile we create new boogeymen that we chase down, like people going to an old Latin Mass. They become the new demons to be shunned and shut out of the church. This is, I have to say, I get so many letters from young people and my heart breaks for them. I don't know what to say, frankly, to them because, you know, they're asking me for answers. I don't have answers about this. Bob, we still hear accusations that Cordileone has politicized the Eucharist. Very quickly, your thoughts.
Well, I mean, he's countered, I think, quite beautifully, saying that there are people, presumably Nancy Pelosi, who are themselves weaponizing the Eucharist because she claims she's studied the issue and this is sacred ground that she is on about a woman's right to choose. It may be sacred ground for her, but it's not Catholic sacred ground. Look, I think what most people see when they look at this is the Catholic Church now means business about abortion in the United States. On all the other issues that the Holy Father cares about the climate, about refugees, about the poor, he actually encourages states to take action, to receive as many people as they can who are refugees, you know, to do something concrete. He gets behind initiatives at the UN and in other places about the environment. Is abortion the only thing that we're supposed to go slow and tiptoe around when we have actual tens of millions of children every year being killed around the world? I don't think so. And if the church is going to be taken seriously, if we really believe that this is a serious moral issue, we have to at least be as active in trying to stop that slaughter as we are in worrying about climate disasters that could happen 100 years from now.
Before we run out of time, and I want to move through these quickly, but they're important topics, Bishop Dominique Ray in France announced this week that Rome has ordered all diaconal and priestly ordinations planned for the end of June in his diocese to be postponed. The order apparently follows a surprise apostolic visitation of the diocese. Bishop Ray is regarded as one of the more traditional bishops in France and usually has more ordinations than any other French diocese. Father Jerry, your thoughts on this bizarre order from Rome and why you think it's significant?
It's significant because it is interference with the pastoral judgment of the bishop without stating exactly what's wrong with ordaining these men. These men have been studying in the seminary for a number of years, their superiors in the seminary promoting them to holy orders, and then suddenly a blanket refusal to ordain them without stating any reasons. This is, it's in some ways a human rights concern because you tell people, come to our seminary, train, we'll ordain you if you're found worthy by your superiors. The superiors say yes. Now Rome is saying no. Remember at the beginning of the pontificate we heard we don't want a top-down church, we want a collegial church, we want a church of dialogue. Where was the dialogue with these seminarians telling them, I'm sorry, boys, you can't be ordained for the following reason? There was no dialogue. There's simply a decree saying you can't be ordained. A very, very serious matter. I think it's an offense against Christian charity to do this and not state the reasons. And I don't know what good reasons you would give if these men have already been found worthy by their superiors for ordination.
Well, it appears, if you read reports, it appears this is obviously a traditional bishop. The expectation is that he's training traditional priests and deacons that will be raised up in his diocese, and they're being targeted. I mean, this would be a little bit like the Boy Scouts penalizing and driving out guys who've memorized the handbook and know how to tie their kerchief right. I mean, it strikes me as bizarre that you have an institution targeting people who want to follow the rules and expand the gospel as laid down by this institution. For what? What's the alternative here? Bob, it seems the Holy See is almost coming down on traditional Catholic practice, given these heavy-handed tactics and the kind of appointments we're seeing in Rome. And I have to include the story of deposed Bishop Daniel Fernandez Torres of Puerto Rico. Now, he was removed from his diocese in March without explanation, and he's still trying to meet with Pope Francis. Reports say it was his failure to support vaccinations as a moral imperative that led to his demise. Where's the dialogue of which Pope Francis so often speaks, Bob?
Yeah, I think you're exactly right to point to that. Where's the transparency? I mean, certainly we have a canon lawyer here speaking with us, and I don't know canon law, but certainly there are reasons why a person in canon law can petition the Holy Father if he's been accused falsely by some of his fellow bishops or some of his parishioners. I mean, all that has got to be done in a way that is transparent and shows the justice of what's being done. You don't have to say everything about the case that's there, but he seems to have one of the sticking points was that he said that people had a right to conscience about the COVID vaccine, that those who had moral objections or even maybe just were medically worried about the consequences could refrain. Those who wanted to take it could. It seemed to me to be a perfect moral balance within freedom, because the vaccines are listed according to the Vatican, and at the same time, some people may not wish to take those vaccines for various reasons. Look, I think you're right also to point to the fact that there's this way of suppressing what seems to be traditionalism, and in the case of the Latin Mass and also of this diocese in France, these are places that are growing. Somebody who actually wants to see the message of Christ get out further in the world will help to further it where it seems to be growing and attracting people. And yet we seem to have these obscure processes that go on that seem to suppress that. It's disheartening. It seems like the church is almost willfully trying to stamp out the growing part of the laity, and for what, I don't understand.
Yeah, no, well, on the surface, just as a layman, you look at this and you say, this appears unjust, it appears cruel, and it appears anti the vision and the thrust of the church. It just, that's what the facts present. Father Jerry, the apostolic administrator in that Puerto Rican diocese, originally claimed that Cardinal Cupich may have been behind Bishop Torres's ousting. Now, this is horrible. It's a horrible look, I think, not only for the papacy, but for the Vatican and the entire institution here. Your final thoughts?
Well, let's put it this way. As Bob just said, the word transparency. In a just canonical system, decisions that are about public matters have justifications that are stated in public. It's been said, and I think it's true, that Bishop Fernandez did not receive a decree removing him as bishop. He was simply told verbally. Mm-hmm. That is canonically improper. Secondly, he wasn't invited in by the Pope, who was the one who removed him, to discuss the issues at hand. He was simply removed. This is not right. What we're dealing with here, unfortunately, is a lack of respect for the very thing the Pope said he wanted, which was a collegial church. Collegial means the members of the episcopate together engage in friendly and Christian relations, and when there are disputes, they are handled according to pastoral charity and canon law, not according to what happened here, which is basically an unjust removal of a man who was doing a very good job in Arecibo in Puerto Rico. I hope the Pope meets with him, because the Pope meets with other people who do not support Catholic doctrine, and they have very pleasant meetings with him. Well, Bishop Fernandez deserves a meeting in which he can open his heart to the Pope and say, Holy Father, whatever you were told about me, I want to set it straight. And the people of Arecibo have been offended by my removal in this manner.
Yeah, well, I hope, too, that Bishop Fernandez gets that meeting, but my sense is he's following the Cardinal Zen pattern here, and he'll be waiting out in the piazza. Gentlemen, we will leave it there. For commentary by Robert Royal and Father Gerald Murray, visit thecatholicthing.org. And Calming the Storm, Navigating the Crises Facing the Catholic Church and Society by Father Gerald Murray is available at bookstores everywhere, including EWTN's catalog. Thank you, gentlemen.